Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special celebration. As you can tell from the title of this video, we have reached 10,000 subscribers on the channel, an event that I still struggle to wrap my head around. So to celebrate it properly, it felt right to do a community-driven project this time round. Given that I've been doing Yakuza content on this channel for a number of years now, there were bound to be certain questions surrounding my views on the series, or content creation as a whole, that the community around it would be interested in seeing answered. So grab a warm drink and take a breather, as I go over every question you were thoughtful enough to present to commemorate this momentous occasion. We'll start off with the comments from my community post on YouTube, and then circle back to the Twitter comments, so without further ado, let's go! If you could bring one series character back from the dead, who hasn't already had a mysterious doppelganger appear, who would it be? Spoilers for Yakuza 3, seeing as I'll be mentioning its final boss here, but I would really love to see Mina return in some capacity. I enjoyed his dynamic with Kiryu quite a bit, being a dark parallel to an orphan upbringing, and I feel that Mina's sense of brutality would make any future Yakuza conflicts all the more intriguing to see unfold. Also, I made a whole video deconstructing him in the past, which should explain any further reasons why I'd like to see him return. Next up, we have a quick succession of questions that are as follows. Favorite antagonist? If we're talking both writing-wise and boss fight-wise, it will be the final boss of The Man Who Erased His Name. Favorite character? That would be Ukiyo Tatsuya from Kurohyou. Top 3 minigames? Probably karaoke, mahjong, and disco, surprisingly enough. What inspired your profile pic / what is it? So, regular viewers of the channel likely know that I list Devil May Cry as an influence that was just as important to the creation of this channel as Yakuza itself. And this profile picture is another perfect example of that. The lower half obviously signifies a Yakuza family member with a classic suit and tie, while the upper half is literally just Virgil in his Sin Devil Trigger form from DMC5. While I do prefer Dante as a character, something about how this edited image looked felt right for the channel, and seeing as Yakuza and DMC got me back into gaming after some time away, it felt right to represent them both in such a way. What are your interests outside of video games and Yakuza? And are you planning to pursue YouTube full-time? With regards to my other hobbies, they include listening to metal music, playing guitar, watching anime, and reading manga / light novels. Seeing as more people asked me about my musical background, I will elaborate on it later on in the video, but with regards to the other hobbies I listed, here are some quick favorites. My favorite anime is Code Geass, my favorite manga is Tokyo Ghoul, and my favorite light novel series is Classroom of the Elite. They all have an interesting psychological element to them that makes them intriguing to experience. As to whether or not I will pursue YouTube full-time, probably no, because that would likely force me to chase trends to keep churning out content on an even more regular basis. Plus, I'm not really a fan of how the platform is evolving over time. Having said that, as long as I feel that I still have things left to say on Yakuza, or any related series that I adore, you can expect that I'll keep covering them for years on end. Next, we have another brief collection of questions. What will be your dream RGG game? Kurohyou Kiwami. Simple as that. What minigames would you like to see in the future, returning, or something completely new? Probably the racing minigame from Yakuza 5. We got something similar to it in one of Lost Judgment School stories, so basically just more of that, cause it's really fun. What are your favorite aspects of Yakuza games, and what are your most important aspects in games in general? It really depends on the type of game we're discussing. In the case of Yakuza, it will be character drama and a form of beat-em-up combat, taking very mild inspiration from character action games in the broadest of strokes. In character action games, on the other hand, it will be versatility and depth of combat, coupled with the classic humor you'd find in DMC, Bayonetta, and God Hand. Smash or pass video when on the Like a Dragon series characters. It would take an eternity to make, and it would definitely piss everyone off, so I won't be doing it anytime soon. As for my favorite characters, I'm pretty well on record for praising Songhee and Akame most of all, so I think that gives you a rough idea of how such a video would transpire either way. Favorite car you've owned / dream car? I'm actually more of a motorcycle enthusiast, truth be told, but if I could get any car ever, it would probably be the Audi R8 Star of Lucis. I know this sounds hyper-specific, but Final Fantasy XV had some strange cross-promotions over the years, and that car is probably the greatest thing to have come out of them, so yeah. My question is your thoughts on Daigo and his dynamic with Kiryu throughout the series. I'm a massive fan of the dynamic between them. It was one of my favorite parts in Yakuza 6 and Infinite Wealth. Plus, I love how the two of them have grown over time. I think Daigo deserves a lot more credit for what he accomplished, and I'm glad he and Kiryu still cross paths through this father-son dynamic without relying on it too much. It feels natural rather than a crutch to fall back on from my perspective. Are there any of the minigames or side content like Clan Creator or Colosseum you like from any particular entry in the series? Apart from the minigames I mentioned earlier, Gaiden's Colosseum quickly became one of my favorite additions ever. I genuinely hope Pirate Yakuza continues in that direction, because having so many movesets at your disposal, limited though they may be, really makes your imagination go wild, with how RGG goes about creating new movesets in the franchise. My question is, what is your favorite all-time heat action? Oof, too many to count. But off the top of my head, either the cigarette heat action from Yakuza 3, or the agent heat action where Joryu uses all of the gadgets at once. Also, Essence of Remembrance from Infinite Wealth, if that counts. What is your favorite boss moveset in the series? Either Nishiki's, Mine's, or Majima's. Even though we've seen them many times over the years, there's still a blast to go up against. Honorary mention goes to Okita Soji and Okada Izo, but I genuinely can't pick just one moveset here because they're all so different. From watching your content and the RGG podcast, I notice how well versed you are in many areas such as music, game design, literature, and language. My question is, how did you get this good at all this stuff at the same time? Well, first off, thank you, that's a lot more generous than I deserve. When it comes to attaining knowledge in those specific areas, it largely came from me getting overtly into the art that I enjoy, to the point where I'd wind up researching the whole creative process behind the game or song, while also considering the influences of the people involved. After spending enough time with a given field of interest, you naturally pick up on the basics behind it, which, luckily for me, helped me elevate the content that I do on the channel. And in turn, it made me more interested to learn even more about composition, game development, creative writing, and so on. So yeah, it's a never-ending cycle. Do you think that Kiwami 2 is a flawed experience when compared to OG 2? Would you recommend that people try OG Yakuza 2? I've always felt that OG 2 and Kiwami 2 were not meant to be mutually exclusive to one another, but to instead be complements to one another. I do think that everyone in the community should play Yakuza 2 at some point, partially because of my personal gripes with K2, but also because of the amount of unique content that has yet to return in some capacity. Cough cough, Shinseicha. But yeah, they're both drastically different experiences, so if you do have the means, please play them both. Do you think the Yakuza franchise moving away from traditional Yakuza villains to gangsters is due to anti-Yakuza laws in media? Also, would you want another prequel Yakuza game, and if so, what time period? With regards to the Yakuza-type villains, I'm sure the laws played a part in it, because the series has always kept up with modern trends in Japan and evolved alongside them. But I reckon their change also had to do with wanting to write different types of villains as well. There's a type of archetype in terms of Yakuza characters that you can never fully stray from, so switching out this basis likely helped them come up with different motivations for the newer villains in some capacity. As for a Yakuza prequel, a Kazama game would be really cool, though I have no particular time periods to elevate above the others. As long as RGG is excited over the game, we'll be in good hands. Will you make video analysis videos covering other games such as Final Fantasy or games you have played? Yes, provided it doesn't stray too far from the content I currently do. As you can tell from my Jin Kazama character analysis, I approach the series that I enjoy in somewhat comparable ways, so I'd love to use my current skill sets to deconstruct a number of games like those from the DMC series, Nier Automata, and as for Final Fantasy specifically, you can expect some form of coverage for 16, 15, 10, and Versus 13 down the line. At least, that's what I'd love to do if I have the time. What is your dream crossover? Any form of media, not just Yakuza or video games. My dream crossover is Yakuza and Devil May Cry. I have no idea how that would work, but I adore these two series way too much. So even if it's something as simple as costume DLCs in some of the games, I'd be delighted to see that. Favorite VA performance in the series? Okay, so for the longest time, I considered Kuroda Takaya's voiceover in the final Nishiki scene in OG Yakuza 1 to be the best and most heartbreaking moment he ever performed. However, having seen the moment in Gaiden where Hanawa hands Kiryu a tablet, I think the performance that followed was his crowning achievement. Kiryu's delivery broke me beyond words, and I was just sobbing throughout the entire exchange. Hands down, the best performance of the franchise for me. You mentioned being a big DMC fan, so what's your favorite Devil Arm/Devil Bringer in the series? Let's see. For Devil Arms, I'd have to go with either Alistair or Devil Sword Dante. For Firearms, I'd go with Pandora, cause it saved me a ton of effort in DMC4's accursed Bloody Palace. And for Devil Bringers, my old reliable has always been Punchline. Helped out a ton with the S ranks as well. What is your favorite sub-story from each game? Well, seeing as we have 20 games under our collective belt, I'll just list off 5 random favorites for the time. Off the top of my head, Murder at Cafe Alps from Yakuza 3, Rise of the Dragon from 0, Slip and Slide from Yakuza 5 for the hilarity alone, and The Destruction from Gaiden, and A Final Request from Judgment. Will you and or the other RGG YouTubers ever cover the amazing mod scene efforts? I can't speak for the other guys, but personally, I'm not that well versed in the modding scene beyond the most popular efforts, though that might also have to do with the fact that I'm more of a console gamer. That aside, I have seen a number of Katie's videos and thought that they were amazing, especially the most recent one, related to a certain boss fight from Infinite Wealth. Also, speaking of cool mods, massive thanks to Jirino for making a Gaiden New Game Plus mod so quickly post-launch. Back to the question, will I cover the mods in detail? Probably no, because I feel that the projects I've seen speak well enough for themselves, so I'll instead retweet some cool ones that I come across down the line. Do you think we'll ever get Hostess Management back? I've always hoped for a spin-off game that is focused on that minigame, possibly an Akiyama Gaiden. If it does return, an Akiyama Gaiden is probably our best shot for it, but honestly, after going for the completion in Hostess Maker specifically, it really made me sour on the experience, so I hope that they make it a bit more free-flowing once it returns, with less walking around and RNG involved. What made you become a YouTuber, and mainly a Yakuza YouTuber? Originally, I made this channel so that I could have a place to save the more involved video edits that I've done. Like for example, Jingo's laugh keeps interrupting Kiryu. That piece was essentially what led me to learn video editing and audio editing, and I was quite proud with how it turned out. As time went on, and I played more and more Yakuza games for myself, I came across the first Kudokyo game, and I loved it so much that I wanted to compile all of my knowledge on that spin-off series for any future fans that may be curious about it, since Kudokyo barely had any video essay coverage back when I started. So, one video led to another, and eventually, I started covering Yakuza as a whole, cause it felt the most fulfilling on a personal level, and I wound up meeting a lot of amazing people thanks to my time with the series. So, yeah, it's been surreal to see what we've accomplished thus far. If you can make a new, non-canon spin-off, would you want another samurai game, a Dead Souls-like, or an IP-based one like Lost Paradise? Between these 3 options, I'd go with the IP-based suggestion. Specifically, I'd want RGG to make a Gintama game. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it dozens of times lately, and while I realize it may be infuriating to see someone suggest a series with several hundred episodes, where the first 50 episodes are essentially just a slow and steady build-up, believe me when I say that a Gintama game would be one of the most fun and potentially most heartbreaking games that RGG ever worked on. Yakuza and that manga are essentially estranged brothers in the strangest conceivable way. Does Akiyama deserve a game more than Majima, in your opinion? While I want them both to get a Gaiden game, in response to your specific question, no. Akiyama doesn't deserve the game more than Majima. And my reasoning for that comes from the way these 2 characters have been treated with time. With Majima, we knew he would fit the protagonist mantle again, if not through Dead Souls, then particularly through Yakuza 0. But with Akiyama, there's the issue where his involvements post-Yakuza 4 don't really necessitate him to be a protagonist. The ethos of his writing puts him in the role of someone who's a helping hand, who's there to help someone else achieve their dream, rather than seek personal growth for himself. And this painted him as more of a supporting character in Yakuza 5, and actually rendered him as such in 6 and onwards. This isn't to say that he doesn't have the potential to have a story of his own, but until the segment with him in Infinite Wealth, I had the impression that the writers didn't know what to do with him, meaning that giving him a Gaiden game before Majima would have been riskier than I'd like. If you could decide what the next RGG game is, what would it be? A new IP or a Yakuza spin-off? What would the genre and general theme be like? Well, apart from my usual clamoring for Kurohyo Kiwami, if I could just demand any type of game imaginable, I'd want to see RGG tackle a character action game. A true character action entry, rather than an action RPG that takes occasional inference from DMC, which people infuriatingly mistake for actual character action these days. Anyway, back to the point, I'd want a game with a proper mission-based structure, cheeky interactions, a style meter, combat that incentivizes creativity, etc, etc. I'd want that type of experience to serve as a chaotic spin-off that would be a one-and-done deal, cause I think that the end result would be amazing. Which city could you see yourself actually wanting to live in? Not necessarily to enjoy the underground entertainment, but just as a normal civilian, or both. When going over my favorite cities in Yakuza, I usually end up with either Tokyo or Osaka, but I feel that the more leisure nature exhibited in Sotenbori and Shinseicho would be more pleasant to see on a daily basis. The Omi Alliance may cause mayhem from time to time, but there are far more explosions in Kamurocho on a yearly basis, so I'm picking Sotenbori. You can change one game design decision about one minigame anywhere in the franchise. What is it? I would revert the karaoke UI to be like the one in the pre-Dragon Engine days, cause the new UI makes my eyes hurt pretty quickly if I play more than 3 songs in a row. How do you think a Hideo Kojima directed Like a Dragon game would be like? It would be the most beautifully convoluted masterpiece ever conceived. I'm well on record as being a massive fan of his work, so here's my absurd suggestion. Give Kojima the rough layout for the story of Yakuza 5 and have him run wild with his suggestions. Give us a 5 Kiwami featuring Kojima Productions and see the whole community lose their shit over it. Have you ever drastically changed your opinion on any of the games upon replay? Yeah, ironically enough, considering the last question, cause it was Yakuza 5. When I was waiting for the game to release in 2012, and leading up to its localization in 2015, I thought that this game would be a masterpiece. Based on everything that I've experienced through rough translations, Google translated Japanese fan discourse, and game footage on YouTube. Then, fast forward to the official localizations over the years, and with each new replay that I've done, I started seeing more and more flaws with the story, which impacted the way I see the game as well, cause the gameplay and narrative are a package deal for me. And so, I started writing a script about this journey of mine, and now I have a script with over 46,000 words that allowed me to put my thoughts on that game in order, and finally fall in love with it again. Except this time, it was in spite of its many flaws. Do you like the rubber bullet twist? Conceptually, yes, but then they reused it so many times to the point where it became absurd, so I understand the meme factor and disdain it attained in the community. It also soured me on the concept as well. What do you think Kiryu's role will be down the line in the series? Same for Ichiban. With Kiryu, I'd like to see him continue to be in a proper mentor role, a la what Dante was to Nero in DMC 4 and 5, and that's basically what we've had in Infinite Wealth with Kiryu, which was awesome to see. As for Ichiban, the writers could really go in any direction with him, but I would personally love to see him mature bit by bit with each new game. I'm not saying he should be as stoic as Kiryu, far from it, but think of evolving him like Judai in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I know it's a strange comparison for this channel, but if you know, you know. What is your process of making a video? If you can delve a bit more into the programs and equipment you use. Making a video is pretty straightforward. I write some bullet points for a topic that I later expand into a proper script, then I do the voiceover, edit the audio, and use that as the basis of the video later. As for the equipment, it's pretty much a solid budget setup, with a Samsung C01U Pro microphone and a cheap pop filter. The software that I use, on the other hand, includes Audacity for anything related to audio and OpenShot for the video editing. And that's it. What's your idea of the perfect Yakuza villain? Depends on whether we're talking just in terms of writing, in terms of a boss fight, or the combination of both. If we're talking the complete package, I've literally made a video called The Perfect Yakuza Boss, where I deconstruct a certain individual from Like a Dragon Gaiden, so I hope that video will answer the question further. In short, the perfect villain is one that is succinctly written and executes on what he's always been written to be. So no last-second plot twists that undo the basis of the individual, like this series likes to do with many of its villains. What do you think the chances are of Kurohyo Kiwami being made? Objectively, virtually non-existent, but I'll still keep talking about it because that is my Yume. Once I finish my indie game, do you want a review code? It's a Yakuza Monster Hunter-esque action RPG. Full disclosure, my current schedule is a nightmare with ever-increasing IRL obligations, to the point where I barely have time to do regular content on the channel, so I feel that a review code would be wasted on me if I couldn't give it 100% of my focus. Having said that, once that game releases, feel free to tag me on Twitter so that I can share it. Wishing you the best of luck with the project, by the way. What is your theory behind Kiryu's original outfit being a darker shade of color in Infinite Wealth? Do you think the devs made that change intentionally to cement the fact that Kiryu's psyche has changed for the worst in some areas, or is it just a cosmetic change? Honestly, that might be a great idea for a dedicated video. I think there is some deliberance in the color change, considering Kiryu's comments on the importance of suit color at the end of Yakuza 0. One could even see the change to purely black attire early on in Infinite to be a parallel to how his journey started with his youthful brutality, and have him almost end the journey how he began, until he eventually loops back to his signature attire once he regains his sense of self, the one that was redefined over time. But yeah, that's just one brief reading on it. Do you think the LAD series can move forward with Ichiban, or do you think RGG's future lies in another franchise, like Judge Eyes or something entirely separate from Yakuza? I don't think either of these are where RGG's future lies, and I do mean that in a constructive manner. I still think that Ichi should have been a couple of years younger than he is, for him to be able to carry the torch for as long as Kiryu. And that's even taking on the consideration how these games have the tendency of showcasing supreme athleticism in its supposedly senior citizens. On the other hand, as much as I love Judgment, depending on how a potential third game would evolve narratively, they could run into the same issues that the middle era of Yakuza had, with an undefined end goal pulling the characters in too many directions. I think once the Ichiban saga concludes, they should bring out a more youthful protagonist and have us see his journey from the very brash beginnings into his late years. Essentially, like what we've had with Tatsuya from Kurohyo, but extended. We are talking about longevity here, and I genuinely think that this would be the most pragmatic choice for the writers to make. Did you ever watch Civet's Gaiden video? And if so, what's your thoughts on it? Ah, very interesting question, given that I do enjoy quite a few of his videos. Yes, I've seen the Gaiden video, and frankly, I didn't enjoy it, though I do understand why he had to make it. As that particular piece evolved, it felt like more of a personal, emotional response to the game rather than a carefully articulated one, and I mean that in a positive way. It felt like a person airing out their personal grievances over an entry that was still subject to massive praise, like most Yakuza games tend to be on launch, and that expression was amplified with some classic series fatigue that we can all be subject to. The commentary came off a lot more antagonizing towards the game than it may have been intended, which led to the community at large responding very vocally, and led to even more vitriol all around, which was unfortunate. Having said all of that, I don't think that people should write off all of his coverage by nature of one extreme video, cause he has a ton of amazing stuff on his channel. It's just that he isn't clicking with Yakuza right now, and that's completely fair. I think some time away from it could help out on that front, and lead to a more balanced retrospective down the line. I would love to see it myself. Do you think that Infinite Wealth's story could have been better if they didn't split Ichiban and Kiryu, or had at least shared the finale? I feel that anything I share on this topic could balloon into a multi-hour discussion, so I'll just say that Infinite Wealth's narrative issues go deeper than the splitting of parties. It shows a number of the same narrative issues as Yakuza 5, ironically enough, meaning that just one change couldn't help reframe the story to reach its fullest potential. Now, the idea of a shared finale is intriguing, and I hope that Like a Dragon 9 sees the return of the infamous stepbrother so that we see his writing actually be refined into the gem it could have been, cause the character's treatment in Infinite was thoroughly disappointing due to the potential wasted. I've seen you use Devil May Cry gameplay footage in one of your videos, do you ever plan on, or have thought about, making a video on one of the Devil May Cry games? Yeah, I would love to cover a number of them. But for now, I only have a concrete idea of covering DMC3 in a shorter scale video. The problem with that series is that much of what I'd want to say, or the discussions I'd like to start, have already been done by nature of some fantastic video essays by The Sphere Hunter, Foxcade, Codex Entry, The Gaming Brit, and others. So I need to see what I can do that doesn't feel redundant by comparison. Out of all of your videos, which one are you proud of the most? Well, this one is actually a top contender, thanks to the community involvement. Other than that, I've always had a soft spot for the more detailed character analyses I do, like the one on Mine or Okada Izo, as well as the massive tier lists, like the one on Yakuza Platinums. I can't pick just one video, but those are my top 3 categories for the time. With the YouTube comments done, we can now move on to the Twitter questions. Let's say you're back in high school or middle school. It's lunch break. What table are you sitting at, and why? Alright, first off, I love the fact that this image came from one of the funniest people in the community. Secondly, while the table setups had me laughing for a good couple of minutes non-stop, I narrowed my choices down to tables 2, 5, 9, and 10. And if I had to stick to one, I'd probably choose table 10. I would spend most of my time asking Kiryu-centric questions that would be pointed at Onomichio, with Gary being my translator and Alohappy just ominously staring throughout. It feels like the setup for the most uncomfortable yet belly-achingly hilarious table chat that I can imagine, and I want to see if Gary's broken English would lead to Kiryu breaking character or just sticking to his Gaiden-esque fallback of denying his identity. But yeah, absurdly good choices. You mentioned in one of your videos that you're a fan of Gintama, so my questions are: who is your favorite character and what is your favorite story arc? Where do I even begin? Well, I feel like it would be cheating to say that Gintoki is my favorite, cause he is the protagonist, and I'd argue he's the best shonen protagonist we've ever had. So, alongside him, I'd have to give props to Katsura, Hijikata, and Sogo. If any of them are involved in a scene, you're sure to have a blast. And their more personal arcs are genuine tearjerkers like classic Yakuza stories tend to be. As for favorite story arcs, my fondest memories are tied to the Yoshiwara arc and Benizakura. The Benizakura one is pretty self-explanatory, as it's the arc that sold the most people on Gintama alongside its recognizable humor. And Yoshiwara is amazing by default for introducing best girl Tsukuyo. I could go on with the various Shinsengumi arcs and obviously the final arcs of Gintama, but really, whatever your pick is, you can't go wrong with the series. It's perfect. Who is your favorite musician? If we're talking bands, my favorite has always been the band Dream Theater, with Trivium and Kizu rounding up my personal top 3. If we're talking individual musicians, on the other hand, my favorite is very likely Mike Portnoy, who is the drummer for Dream Theater, and someone I had the pleasure of meeting this year. Awesome individual and awesome band. Which character's fighting style do you enjoy playing the most? Bonus question, who sings Bakamitai the best, in your opinion? With regards to the first question, it's always been a tie between a few fighting styles, including Dragon Style in Kiwami, Wild Dancer in OG Ishin, and Agent from Kiryu's Gaiden. Hard to pick a single one though. As for the Bakamitai question, the objectively correct answer is Akiyama, by nature of his vocal control and unique texture he lends to the song. Though my personal favorite version is the one from Yakuza Kiwami, because it's a lot more laid back and acoustic. Besides the guitar, what other instruments have you played? If none, are there any you'd like to try? So, I originally started with the drums, and got pretty solid when it came to classic metal drum patterns, but I eventually switched over to guitar due to an injury. If you want to add my god-awful attempts at singing to the roster of instruments, then that's 2 instruments I know alongside the guitar. Really glad to see so many questions about music, by the way. Thank you. What got you into the Yakuza games and music as well? With Yakuza in particular, I got into it through a gaming magazine article from 2008. It was a magazine called Gameplay, which is sadly no longer published under that name. Anyway, they did a review of the then upcoming Yakuza 2. So between the screenshots I've seen and the descriptions that were used, that was all that I really needed to sign up for the series. As for getting into music, it's a bit of a strange story. Unlike my classmates, I only got to play original copies of PlayStation games on my PS2, and after a while, I'd played them all so many times that I knew each game's layout inside out. So I started focusing on non-gameplay related aspects upon replays, like the different OSTs that were featured. The soundtrack to GTA Vice City Stories in particular served as a starting point for me getting into metal, as I was fortunate enough to have an older sibling with a massive CD collection that felt like an extension of those songs. One thing led to another, and I wound up learning some instruments along the way. What was your reaction when RGG switched to turn-based combat for the mainline games? Funnily enough, because I tend to bring this up rather frequently, I wasn't a fan of turn-based combat when the switch was announced, but that didn't put me off from trying Yakuza 7. If anything, I was actually not that into RPG elements in games either until I saw Yakuza's unique twist on them. And it's because of that recognizable twist that's been present since day one in the series that assured me that any creative choice that RGG may dabble in would be worth experiencing. Fast forward to Yakuza 7's release, and I loved it so much that I platinumed it. And I even wound up trying some other turn-based franchises because of that positive experience. Do you do completion outside of Yakuza games, or just love Yakuza that much? A little of both. I only do completion in games that I really adore, but when it came to Yakuza in particular, there was something about the way its platinum requirements were implemented that felt like a natural extension of further getting into the world of the series. Nowadays, it's basically a given that I'll platinum the next Yakuza game that drops, which isn't necessarily the case with all of my favorite franchises, by nature of the time investment and different skill sets required. If you could change anything in the series, retcon, gameplay, anything at all, what would it be? Apart from my frequent comments on fixing the combat in Yakuza 0, I would give Gaiden and the Kaito files a New Game Plus mode. It's as simple as that. Which Yakuza game do you think should be more appreciated? Also, which game in the franchise do you like the least? I feel that each game in the franchise has a sizable enough following if you really look into it, but the non-localized entries really deserve some more recognition. So yeah, Kurokyo, Ishin, and Kenzan. As for my least favorite game in the franchise, it's hands down Kiwami 2. And it also has, in my opinion, the single worst hand-to-hand combat of the franchise. I'll go over it in more detail once I do a proper games tier list later on, but even with a game like K2, I'd still rather play that game for days on end than have to depend on standard AAA releases that were being spoon-fed these days. Point being, don't let my criticism of it dissuade you from playing or enjoying Kiwami 2. Any tips for learning how to deconstruct/analyze music? I'd suggest watching behind-the-scenes footage from your favorite bands. In my case, Dream Theater is known for composing rather complex music, but they actually like to explain the logic behind each key change or time signature change, which helps broaden your understanding of music significantly. Other than that, it's just a matter of sharing why you love the music you love, which is more than enough for a noteworthy analysis, in my opinion. What does Gokudoni mean? It's a portmanteau, I think that's how you pronounce that word, of the words Gokudo and Oni. The Gokudo part represents the Yakuza series as a major influence on the channel, whereas the word Oni, which translates to demon or devil, represents my other massive influence, which is Devil May Cry. When will you add me on Discord? Honestly, I don't really use Discord, unless I'm recording an episode of the RGG cast. It's also the reason why I don't intend on making a server anytime soon, so yeah, sorry. Any games you love besides the big three? I'm guessing by the big three you mean Yakuza 0, 7 and Lost Judgment, as those three tend to be the most praised entries in the community. If that is the case, then the episode of the RGG cast, where we ranked the entire franchise, should give you an idea of what games I adore more than others. If you could collab with any YouTuber who has 100%ed 9 Yakuza games so far this year, and whose name starts with a J, who would you collab with? Alright, first off, I love the way that you phrased this question. For anyone who may not be acquainted, you've likely seen one of Jan's videos in your recommended tab over the past year. And if you haven't, do check them out. As a fellow completionist, it's always awesome to see someone tackle this series in such a way and document their journey so pedantically. As for a collab, given that my current schedule is an absolute mess, I sadly can't make any promises, but feel free to send a message if you're ever in need of a hand in your current video series. wishing you the best of luck with the journey, and that the views only get better from here. Are you considering releasing original music anytime soon? Currently, no, because the channel is my main focus during my ever-decreasing spare time. If I released something in the future, I would want it to be substantial and meaningful, rather than a one-and-done single. So until I can offer it the attention it deserves, it will remain on the back burner. Having said that, I do intend on recording some alternate takes on a couple of Yakuza tracks in the future, as I've done before on my Twitter account. Alright, next up, I have no bloody clue how to construct an entertaining response to this particular tweet, so I will instead proceed to the final question from the Twitter batch. Why Akiyama is Akiyama? And why Akiyama is the best Akiyama? Because Koichi Yamadera has inhuman vocal range. God bless our Kingdom Hearts enthusiast and greatest moneylender. Alright, that was a pretty strange note to end it on, but I think that's all the questions that were sent. Genuinely, I can't thank you enough for the effort and interest you've shown in the channel over the years, so instead, I'll just let the content speak for itself. I hope this video was a truly enjoyable one for you, and that you'll look forward to whatever comes next. I was originally going to do a full-on game tier list for the 10K celebration, but between working on a massive project behind the scenes over the past few months, and the fact I was fortunate enough to partake in the RGG cast episode focused on that very theme, I decided to shelve that particular tier list vid for the time. That way, if another massive milestone comes up, I can add all the new Yakuza games that were released in the meantime, like Majima Gaiden, into the mix, and offer you the most definitive list that I can. Other than that, I'll just keep doing what I've done up to now, as long as I physically can. So once again, thank you for all the love and support thus far. So, until next time, take care of yourselves, and have a flawless day. Cheers!